I really welcome the opportunity to speak about special education today and would like to thank Sinn Féin for bringing forward this motion. I receive correspondence every week from parents fighting and struggling to get their children to education and for the supports that they need, as does everybody in this House, I think. Because the systems that are in place just simply aren't good enough. There are nowhere near enough special schools, school therapists, SNAs or ASD classes. And if children are lucky enough to receive the supports that they need in primary school, their parents have to go away and fight the whole fight all over again once their child enters secondary school. This is a problem across the country. There is a complete absence of forward planning. Primary and secondary schools seem to operate in completely separate bubbles. Instead of being able to work together and predict and plan the supports the children in primary school will need to go into secondary school, they just don't. And I think it's quite frankly incredible. These are the absolute basics and they're just not happening. I spoke to a mother and her twin daughters just last week about how this is impacting on them. One of the twins has Down syndrome and has had a full-time SNA in mainstream primary school since they were in junior infants. They've basically been together since they were born. So Minister, you can imagine having spent all of that time together throughout their whole life to find out now that one twin will be able to start in the mainstream secondary school and the other one is on a wait list came as a real blow to them. One of them actually showed me a picture they'd drawn with the two twins together and forever written on it because of the thought of them being separated at this point. So one of the twins is entitled to a place and the other one is on a wait list. And we know that for children with additional needs, the transition to secondary school can take years, it can be really difficult. And getting children kind of prepared for that and comfortable with the move. And it's really important that they know exactly what that move is going to be and what's going to happen in order to prepare for that. And now this child could be separated from their twin and their classmates that they've grown up with. All because there just doesn't seem to be any forward planning. Schools only considering the needs of children who apply in October for the following September just isn't good enough. And it's failing children every day around the country. It's beyond comprehension why the secondary and primary school systems can't seem to speak to each other about the needs of their students starting from junior infants. There's so many years to plan for this. A secondary school in West Cork has one place open for an ASD unit with 6 children in the local area needing a place. All of whom attended the local primary school and were in ASD classes. And now they'll have to travel to secondary schools outside of their catchment area because the ASD classes were full. And I really want to stress that this and the other scenario in no way, shape or form are the fault of the school in either of those situations. I've actually visited those schools and I've seen firsthand the absolute drive and passion that the teachers and the principal have for special education. I've seen how hard they fundraise, how much they value inclusivity and diversity, and what they've put into having special classes and ASD classes, and they are accommodating people from outside the county at the moment. But the department's policies just don't help schools provide all of the children that need the support with support. And the policies that the SNAs have isn't helping them do that. I've been in contact with a huge number of parents from Fermoy Educate Together as well, which I know has already been mentioned, from the national school over the last few weeks, where the lack of physical space in the school has reached a crisis point. There's a huge demand for non-denominational schools across the country due to this government and previous governments' complete inaction and failure on school divestment, I have to say. And now Fermoy is now in a position where children are being educated in corridors and the staff room because there's such a lack of space. Not only does it damage the standard of education that the school is able to provide, it's a health and safety risk, it's a fire hazard, and a complete sensory overload for many of the children in the school. The school was given the go-ahead to open an ASD class, but they don't have the physical space to be able to do that. I was contacted by parents whose children are in the process of being assessed for ASD and are now facing the prospect of having to withdraw their children from Why Educate Together and put them into a religious school, and they don't want to do that. They want to send their child to a secular school, but that choice is ultimately being taken away from them. I think it's important to highlight that the school was placed in the basement floor of the Department of Education building, which the ETB are currently occupying. So it was clear from the beginning that the allocated space was never going to be adequate for the 104 students in the divestment agreement. My understanding is that the ETB are refusing to provide the school with any further space in the building, and that the department couldn't offer the school a single helpful suggestion for where to go from there. So now it's a situation where the school, the ETB and the neighbouring sports clubs are being pitched against each other to fight for space, and it is entirely the fault of the Department of Education and a lack of planning. Minister, I'm just wondering what is going to be done here? What's the department going to do to ensure that these children receive the space they need to be educated safely, and so the school can open a desperately needed ASD class? Every response that I'm receiving from Minister Foley's office is seemingly placing the blame on school enrolment numbers rather than the completely inadequate building provided by the department. It's entirely unhelpful and counterproductive for the department to be making life harder for schools around the country who are just trying to provide the best possible quality of education to all of their students. I'll again point to the absolutely shameful changes to the special education teaching allocations earlier this year as further evidence of this. The decision by the Department of Education to completely remove children with additional needs as a criteria for the allocation of special education teaching hours is dangerous, and it just makes no sense at all. The purpose of SET hours is to provide extra teaching supports to children who require additional supports in schools. For years, these hours have been allocated based on a combination of factors, including the number of children with complex needs in the school. However, from September, they will be assigned on a standardised test results and enrolment numbers. By tying a loss of SET hours to standardised test results, schools are effectively being punished for improving literacy and number rates. I want to read out a quote from a local principal to the Southern Star, that's my local paper, which I think summarises the situation. They said, "The government are not catering for children with additional needs or education, full stop. This measure will force parents' hands into putting their children into special classes or ASD units instead of integrated education. It's taking that choice from them. We were down to 2.5 SET hours last year, and it's the same this year, which effectively means we're down a full day. This country is supposed to be flush with cash, but in this day and age, we shouldn't have to fight for something like this. Funding for primary schools has been cut across the board. Yes, there are free school books, but there's no funding to keep the lights on in schools. The primary education system is on its knees." That's what they said. Minister, funding for primary education is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Principals from all across West Cork have raised major concerns with me about the recent allocation of the ancillary grant. The rate given to schools this year won't even pay for the cleaner, never mind caretaking fees. So they will have to use school funds, which were so hard to raise in the first place, just to keep the school clean. Grants are not keeping up with inflation, the cost of utility and insurance bills. The focus this year seems to be on the hot school lunches, which, to be clear, I fully support and welcome, but many schools can't even afford textbooks at the moment, like that, for the school to be cleaned. Cuts have been coming at schools from every side, and costs just continue to rise. Schools are going into debt and they need financial assistance. They shouldn't be reliant on fundraising to pay for basic equipment that are needed to effectively deliver the school curriculum. And they should not be reliant on fundraising and hard-fought campaigns by parents to increase access to special education. The common thread, again and again and again, when it comes to special education and disability services across the board, is the unacceptable expectation on parents to fight the state for every scrap of support for their children. Every other parent that I speak to who's struggling to get a school place for their child with additional needs, they've already been fighting with schools, fighting with the SNA, fighting with the NCSE, and why should they have to? Why does this government force parents and carers to spend time, energy and money, energy people don't always have in these situations,
Thank you, Deputy.
to fight for support that their children are entitled to?
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Paul